follow on to the survey. That's all it was.
Right.
But I mean, this is the first time I've
Evening.
seen. No, good evening.
Brian gave everybody copies.
Brian, you can't hide.
I was gonna say, I couldn't see it.
Apologize for the ring. Got it turned off.
Oh. Even notice.
Ready?
I am.
Ready? Okay,
We're up.
go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this 17 May 2021 Finance and Ways and Means Committee meeting. The purpose is to review our city finances from January through April of 2021. As a finance committee, welcome to 2021. This committee meeting represents the ongoing commitment to keeping council members and citizens informed, and further represents my intent as chair for this committee to continue to receive quarterly financial updates from the finance director. The updates we received in 2020 proved very valuable in keeping council members informed and updated on a recurring basis. Although we are now 5 months into 2021, the lessons we learned in 2020 are relevant and instructive. The money the city received from the CARES Act was significant in its amount and its impact on our budget. And this update and subsequent updates in 2021 will not just inform council members, but set the stage for the use of funds to be provided in 2021 and 2022 as time goes on. So I look forward to the presentation. And before you start, let me just give my colleagues on the committee an opportunity to make any remarks. Still no?
Okay, let's get started.
All right. Well, thank you. I have kind of an outline here. It's the top 10 list. I guess there's probably not 10, but the top 10 list. We always start with income tax and general fund revenue. That's where we go, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the other funds that we've got. We'll also do a little bit of a deep dive on maybe just one aspect of one revenue item that Greg had asked us to talk about. And I think it's good. We have so many categories of revenue. We talk in broad strokes, but we'll kind of dive down into just one of those, and we can do that in other meetings as we move forward. So we'll start with income tax. Max, go ahead. And we have good news. We got off to a very strong start in the year. Income tax revenues were coming in very strongly. April, however, is our traditional due date for income taxes. Instead, that was moved to today. It was only moved about a month ago, so people had not a lot of time to realize that that was going to be later, but we had a line downstairs earlier today, so today was tax day. And obviously, April took a hit. We didn't change our estimate. It kind of happened late, so normally we would have had a higher April. We'll see how May ends up, but we're to the good for the whole year over our original estimate of where we think will be about $133,000. This is the same information, just kind of in a graph. It would be lovely if all this revenue just came in 12 equal installments, but it doesn't. So that makes it fun and challenging, trying to look where those are going to be. So you see, we're short of April, but really that peak will probably be moved over into May. So the same thing happens really in the general fund. Max. Okay. We have 9 different categories, broad categories of revenue, but there's lots of things in that revenue that, and lots of things in those individual categories. Here, again, we're trying to do our best at estimating where we should be by the end of April and comparing that to where we feel we were. The biggest obvious change here is in property taxes. And frankly, I think that's probably a timing issue. We get that estimate from the county auditor, and he's always very good. And so it's probably just that we have some of the taxes that came in a little sooner than expected. But that's nice to hear, particularly in this COVID generation that that folks are paying property taxes and that that's tracking. Everything else is really very close to on track. The other item that I might mention there is charge for services. Within charge for services, that includes our kilowatt tax. And so that's a little higher than we had anticipated. And that's because we'll have had more electric usage from some of our large plants and some of our large folks. So that's coming in to us as well. So that's a positive thing. The next slide is really, again, that same kind of graphical representation. We're tracking pretty darn close. As you can see, obviously March, and with when we receive some of the property tax dollars from the county. But other than that, we're very close on target. So let me put that in context a little bit. So I deal with this every day, and other folks, you don't think about it like I do. I don't know why, but so the good news is we are ahead of our revenue estimate this year. But I want to put that in context that when we looked at this at the beginning of the year and we were doing our revenue estimates, we knew COVID was still going to be an impact, and we knew that we were still going to be down. And so we generally said, hey, the second half of the year is probably going to be back to where, at least we hope, where we were pre-pandemic. But in total, we are still below 2019. So the good news is we're up above our estimates. The bad news is 21 estimate was still low. And I tried to put that here on this slide for us. The 21 budget assumptions showed revenue coming in really in that second half of the year. And our 21 budget, really that council approved back in December, was out of balance by over $1 million. And we felt comfortable doing that. It's a balancing act, but we felt comfortable recommending that because, first of all, we ended 2020 up $1.9 million thanks to Bureau of Workers' Comp refunds and the COVID-19 CARES Act dollars that we received. Had that not happened, we certainly would have been in a much different position. And we went through that in the kind of that year-end review, but it's helpful, I think, to think back that we had some money. We did not lay anybody off. We did not cut any services. And so this budget said we're going to eat into some of that cash reserve that we gained last year. I have a couple numbers just to kind of put that in context. Income tax revenue in 19 actual was 21 million and change. And we're estimating that's where we'll be this year. So 2 years later, we're back at the same thing. I think that's generally a positive thing. Our expenses still continue to go up a little each year. And you look at the general fund revenues, that's where you see the fact that our revenues are just not income tax. We have lots of other categories of revenue, and not all of those are keeping up or recovering as quickly as the income tax piece. So I think that helps put that in context. I'm certainly not coming with a doom and gloom story by any means, but more of a reminder of, we knew it was going to take a while to recover. We're still hoping for recovery, but as you look at this and as you come to December this year, we're still going to be really concerned and watching revenue to see where revenue is, because you can't pass a budget that's $1 million in hole very many years in a row and have that work. So, all right. So those are kind of the big categories. That's the big overview. Just in one of those categories, refuse and recycling is a separate line item. And Greg had asked me to talk about that a little bit. And so we will talk about refuse and recycling. That started in 2018. And in 2017, we were having the discussion at council that, hey, we have a structural budget problem. And how can we solve that? And what are the choices we have for raising revenue? Lots of discussion. I'm not intending at all to rehash any of that by any means, but there were several things that were looked at. And the one that was kind of decided on was the refuse and recycling fee. There were two main reasons that I remember for that. And one was that people who use the service would be paying for the service, and that it was a fee that was common across the country, certainly across our region. And we had looked at other communities and what other folks were doing. So both cities and rural areas, it was not uncommon to have that similar kind of structure. So with that, we looked at so that was kind of a general revenue source, but certainly it's also one that lends itself well to say, okay, well, we have refuse and recycling, and how does that tie into the revenue that we're bringing in? That wasn't necessarily the first original reason we chose that, but it does marry very well, and people certainly understand that we've got expenses for recycling and refuse collection, and how does our revenue compare to that? So in 2020, we were just under $1 million in revenue that we brought in for that. And I really kind of break this expense piece down into direct expenses and indirect expenses. We do a pretty good job of tracking the direct expenses. We know what the bills are for fuel, for repairing trucks, for our tip fees at the landfill, our recycling fees that we're charged. We can track those pretty well. We have 4 gentlemen that are primarily responsible for driving the trucks. And so those things, their salaries and fringe benefits, those are relatively easy things to track on the direct expenses. And our direct expenses really came to, in 2020, $874,991 is what we have a department, that's the department's expense. So certainly less than our revenue in 2020 from those things. What we don't capture very well just in our system are the indirect costs. And so if we were a business that was running recycling trucks and that was our business, we would be calculating the depreciation on the trucks. We would be the guys that are doing the repair on the truck. We would be calculating a portion of their time for those things. In the city, when we have brush collection and we have some part-timers, or we throw some extra staff members at that, we really aren't capturing that. Those are part-timers, and it's just part of our expense structure, and they go out and help do big trash or help brush collection. I don't have that as a direct number that I can point to and say this is how much that was. So certainly indirect costs are part of an equation. Refuse trucks, if nothing else, on depreciation, those are expensive vehicles, about $250,000 each. We've got multiple, and they'll last a long time. And we've been keeping them together with duct tape and gum in some instances. But certainly those would be depreciated over 15 years, probably, whatever that is. So that would be a cost if we were running the business on matching those items up. If you flip the page, similar analysis for our budget, for 2021. Estimated revenue, 995, again, just short of $1 million. And direct expenses on a budget side, again, we don't know how much fuel we'll use or what kind of repairs we need. So we're budgeted at 932. So again, a little bit less than the estimated revenue, certainly much closer on a budget basis. And again, that doesn't take into account any of the indirect costs that might show up if we were running a business on this. That's kind of the recycling thing. We'll come back. Certainly can answer questions maybe after we do that. Let me keep going for the moment. And kind of a review, the CARES Act funds. I put this up here because the deadline was extended. Originally, the deadline was December 31st of 2020. The dollars had to be spent or you had to send them back. Well, I think there were enough folks that were right on the edge of that. They extended the deadline. Fortunately, we took advantage of that. We had some items that were ordered but hadn't actually come in. And we kind of took a sigh of relief and we didn't have to really worry about pushing that. So the deadline was extended to the end of this year. So December 31st, 2021, we paid all our bills in January. So we spent all the money that was allocated to us through the state. That was $2.4 million. And we spent the vast majority on that, as we talked in an earlier presentation, on safety forces. So police and fire salaries was the majority of what we spent that on. We also spent it on some equipment for ambulances, kind of directly related to some of the activities that they were seeing. And it was a good chance for us to beef up the equipment we had in our ambulances. So we did some of that. And the rest of the dollars were kind of based on telecommuting and being able to do these kind of meetings virtually, and then lots of sanitation and barriers. So if you've been through any of our facilities, you see the plexiglass stuff. And so that was really what the remainder of those were on. But as far as we're concerned, that's been completed. All that's left is audit, which will be coming soon, I'm sure, but we've got that finished. The American Rescue Plan is the next item up. That's the new dollars. That's the act that was passed just about a month ago by and signed into law by President Biden. We are getting some of those dollars directly from the federal government. We qualify that normally. The act says, first of all, you have for cities to get that directly from the federal government, you have to have 50,000 people, and we don't. But we are a non-entitlement city, and we have CDBG, Community Development Block Grant eligibility. And so because of that, we also are eligible to get some of these dollars directly from the federal government. Our number has decreased most recently on the federal government site. I'm sure as they've started to crunch the numbers, they've kind of realigned it. So our most recent number of estimated dollars that we will receive is $7.3 million. We should get half of that very shortly, and the other half will come 1 year later. The bill had four main areas of what was eligible for those dollars to be spent on. But as the case was with the CARES Act and is the case with these dollars, in this case, the United States Treasury will be developing and has developed a much more detailed list of what's eligible to be spent and what's not eligible to be spent. We got the first draft of that last week. In the middle of the week, late one afternoon. It's 151 pages long. Proud to say I've read that through once. It's going to take another time or two for it all to sink in. And so we're still certainly looking at that. Part of the things that are in that guidance, which not only is it guidance, it's requirements. There'll be quarterly reporting that we have to do to the federal government on how we spend those dollars. And part of what they talk about is the timeline on when those dollars have to be spent. So we get half now, half in a year. We have to the end of 2024, so December 31st, 2024, to, they don't use the word encumber, but they use the word commit those dollars. And the Treasury guidance has added to the fact that some of those projects that are eligible are large capital projects, and they want you to do it correctly. So as long as you've committed the dollars by the end of 2024, we actually have till the end of 2026 to spend the dollars. So you got to know what you're doing by the end of 2024, but they want to make sure that, for example, if we were to decide there was a water project, a sewer project, that we still got to meet all the EPA guidelines, that we get everything done correctly. And so they're giving that extra time to make sure that you do it right and get it done correctly. So you'll also see in your board packet tonight, we have a request for a fund to be set up so that we can track those dollars. Again, with quarterly reporting, we're going to need to be able to just grab it easily. You'll see that tonight as setting up the fund so that once we get those dollars, we can put them in there. And then once we start spending, that's where we'll spend it too. Switching gears, we just recently, as you know, we had a council approved issuing a bond earlier this year. And so as part of that project, there's two things that we're going to talk about. One is we were rated on that. We had a rating call with Moody's. They send us a questionnaire. We talk to them on the phone. They review the city finances in pretty good detail. We send out, anytime we have a bond, we have a document that's probably in the neighborhood of 60 to 70 pages long that talks anything and everything about city finances. That's what investors look at when they decide whether they're interested in bidding on our bond. And Moody's looks at that as well. And they affirmed our current AA2 rating. That's a great rating. I'm very happy with that. They had a couple items that they mentioned in their summary, and I'm not going to read this to you, but it is kind of important from a council high-level perspective on what impacts our bond rating. They said a couple nice things. During COVID, we still had kind of an ongoing tax base. We had below average unemployment rate compared to the country and the state. And our general fund performance was very positive, as we've talked about before. So that's really great. The university provides a stabilizing force for the city. That's the good side of that. And politically incorrect, probably the downside of that is that dilutes our income level. So you look at the income and then you populate all the students into that. So our average income, when you count students that don't have much income, is down. And when you compare that across other communities, it looks like our average income is lower. So that's certainly one thing that Moody's looks at. If you turn the page, they kind of list some strengths and some credit challenges. So I'll let you look at those. The credit challenges, exactly what we were talking about, wealth and income metrics, trail sector medians for similarly rated communities. And that's really what that is that we've got some students that don't make a whole lot, so it brings the average down. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention is the last bullet under credit challenges. It says exposure to 2 underfunded cost-sharing pension plans. That's very frustrating to us. We have a requirement set by the state for what the city's share of our pension liability is for every employee, and we pay that. We pay what we're required to pay. We don't pay more than we're required to pay, and some communities have gotten themselves in trouble because in different negotiations, they will say, "Oh, well, we'll pick up not only our share, but we'll pick up the employee share. And we've never done that. And our employees pick up their share. The city picks up our share. But this item comes up and it looks like, well, wait a minute. Hey, what didn't you do? Well, that's really the state and looking at the state's pension plan for public employees in general. They're going to say, hey, it's underfunded. And when we have our audits and our financial statements, a piece of that comes back to Bowling Green and says, well, the state's not handling that. They send it back to wherever it came from. So if you're a contributor, you get part of that liability back, even though we really have nothing we can do about that. So again, my purpose is not to bang any kind of a political hammer. It's really just to say part of the state's unfunded liability comes back to us. Moody's looks at it and they see numbers and say, oh, well, hey, part of this liability looks like it's Bowling Green's. And we're the same as every other public institution in the state. So they're well aware of it. We don't have to explain it. They know when we're on the call, they say, we know, Ohio liability comes back on every community, every county, every school district, whatever in the state. We're all in the same boat. So just misery loves company. So we're all in the same boat. We did sell our bond. We had 4 bids. That's about normal. That's what we've had. Sometimes we've had a few more. Sometimes we've had 1 or 2 less. But the folks who bid are big houses that then resell this. So there was quite a bit of interest. Really, I don't think we can complain at all about the fact that our overall average true interest cost of that is going to be about 2.019% for 30-year borrowing for $9+ million. So felt really good about that. As we talked about the city building in general, now was the time. And so we got a great rate. This will serve the citizens very well, that the timing on this is where we're at in this economic expansion. Now, when we're trying to invest that and earn interest income, that's a different story. But when we're borrowing, that's a great thing. So that really is the completion of the report, pending any questions you might have.
Any questions?
I do have a question. Is it possible to very succinctly explain a little more about how we qualified to get the federal money, though we aren't a 50? You said because we had
because we're community development block grant eligible in our community, that threw us into an eligibility category when the act was passed that allowed us to get money directly from the federal government. All communities are getting something. It's just whether it's coming through the state or whether it's coming directly from the feds. I think the requirements are going to end up being the same. Everybody's going to have to report. Everybody's going to have to jump through the same hoops. It's just who sends us the check, really. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Bill? Okay.
I don't have any questions either. I will say I do appreciate the detailed report. Thank you for adding the explanation on the refuse fee. That over the past year, I've received many questions that I couldn't answer, and this is very helpful to helping answer them for the community. Again, as I said in the open, this report I think will help inform council's decisions down the road. It paid big dividends in 2020. I think you saw that at the end of the year. We had a very informed council that didn't need to be rebriefed at the end of the year. We've been updated at each quarter. So very good.
Yeah, let's do this again sometime.
All right.
But very informative, and thank you very much. So, I think no other comments. I'll conclude this committee meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Then we got till
Okay.
Right.
Good to go.
All right, so the public hearing on Ordinance 8918 is now open. A public hearing is a meeting that provides the opportunity for public discussion regarding ordinances and other matters pending before City Council. Today, Ordinance 8918, as amended by substitution, is at issue. Ordinance 8918 establishes interim zoning of RC recreational conservation zoning for approximately 18.35 acres of land on South Winter Garden Road, and R2 single-family residential for the remaining approximately 0.16 acres recently annexed to the city of Bowling Green as petitioned for by the city of Bowling Green. Interested parties may express their views and submit evidence supporting those views at this public hearing. The information shared will become part of the city's permanent record and may be used by the members of City Council in deciding whether or not to adopt the ordinance. There are usually 4 parts to a public hearing: the staff report, the applicant's testimony, public testimony, and discussion by members of council. We will now receive the staff report from Planning Director Heather Saylor.
Good evening. I put handouts at your seats. There's some extra copies if anybody wants any by Chairperson Phipps's seat. This is the subject of the public hearing is the interim zoning of recently annexed property that council had approved. The actual petitioner is the city of Bowling Green, and I say et al. Because Carlene Krebs, she has a small parcel that is part of this annexation or interim zoning. The location is basically off of Winter Garden. It's not right on South Winter Garden, but it is behind 705 South Winter Garden Road, which is the small parcel, and then the larger parcel, the 18.35 acres behind that one. So the recommendation of Planning Commission on April 7th after the public hearing was to zone the parcel owned by Mrs. Krebs as R2 single family and the city property, which would expand Winter Garden, as RC Recreational Conservation District. I gave you a copy of the R2, pardon me, and then a copy of the RC. RC is what we have all of our parks zoned as, a special zoning district that we created several years ago that's worked really well. So it seemed pretty obvious to really recommend that to City Council. Also gave you a copy of the aerial map that was created and sent also to Planning Commission that shows all the surrounding zoning. And then of course the existing zoning under the Plain Township, which was residential. So that concludes my report unless you have any questions.
Okay, thanks, Heather. John, Greg, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. The planning commission passed this unanimously. Just curious.
Yes. Mhm.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's my only thought.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Ordinance 8918 was initiated by the city, so there's no other applicant testimony to receive. So we will now hear any testimony from the public. Are there members of the public who would like to address the committee at this time? Okay, did we receive any correspondence? Okay, so the members of council will now discuss this ordinance. Greg and John?
I think this is a fine idea to add to our parkland, and I fully intend to support it. I have no further comments.
Okay, John?
Thank you, Greg. I feel the same way.
As do I. Okay, thanks everyone for their participation. This concludes the public hearing on ordinance 8918.
think she's.
Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, everybody, welcome to our regularly scheduled council meeting. Kay, could you call the roll?
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Here.
Hollenbaugh,
Here.
Phipps, here, Robinette,
Here.
Roland,
Here,
Zanfordino.
Here.
Okay, I'd like to change things up a little bit this evening. I'm sure you're all aware that since last Wednesday, there's been a great deal of movement by our governor on the issue of masks. And so I'd like to address that first. What I would like to do, if you would be so kind as to indulge me, I would like to give a little bit of a very brief history of how we came to be where we are with our mask ordinance up to this point. And also, I did a great deal of digging to sort out the confusion since last Wednesday as to what exactly the state of Ohio is saying as of 7:02 on Monday, May 17th, just so we all understand what that is. After that, I'll open it up so that we can have some discussion on the mask ordinance, and then I plan to make a motion regarding the mask ordinance. So, last July, we were kind of in a situation where not as much was known about the virus as is known about the virus now. We didn't know whether or not or when there would be a vaccination that was effective for the virus. We had seen spikes in cases, and we were being cautioned that we didn't want to overwhelm our healthcare system. We were also sort of faced with a strange situation at that time where the governor was referring to these different color codes for different counties, and there was no state mask ordinance. But if a county went to red, there was going to be mandatory mask wearing. But if a county wasn't red, then there wasn't mandatory mask wearing. And so it was a period of uncertainty in which we decided that we would remove some of that uncertainty by having our own ordinance regarding the wearing of masks in Bowling Green. Local law enforcement felt better about enforcing a local ordinance than they did about a governor's order. And there was some fear that, a county might be red and wearing masks one week and then orange and not wearing masks another week, which would just cause a lot of confusion. When we passed the mask ordinance, we then extended it in October, December, and March. And that brings us to where we are right now. With regard to the state of Ohio, last Wednesday, the governor announced that he would be dropping most of the orders that were in place as of June 2nd, with some exceptions, and I'm not going to pretend to know all of them at the moment, but there are exceptions with regard to things like assisted living, jails, public transportation, and things like that. Those orders will extend beyond the June 2nd deadline. And then on Friday, after the CDC came out with some more guidance, the governor said that people who were vaccinated, fully vaccinated, as in either received their one Johnson & Johnson shot or two from Pfizer or Moderna, and then had the 2-week period beyond that, at which point you became fully vaccinated, that those individuals no longer needed to wear masks. So just to clarify where we are at the moment, according to the governor's comments, all of the state orders are currently in effect until June 2nd. However, the exception being people who are completely vaccinated no longer have to wear masks, except for in the situations where they're still required, like public transportation and things like that. At the moment, people who are not fully vaccinated still have to wear masks until June 2nd, at which point it becomes a recommendation rather than the governor's order. So, to the best of my understanding, that is where we are at the moment. With that being said, as I said, I'm planning on making a motion after we discuss, but I'd like to give everyone a chance to give their thoughts on the city's mask ordinance. If anyone would like to jump in.
Mr. President,
Mr. Harold.
I would say that a situation that we do not want to be in is like you mentioned earlier, and that is where there's different regulations in different spots and covered different ways. It's already confusing enough with all the different outlets. And so whatever we can do to conform with the state requirement and federal, I think would be very prudent. And I think we are at a point where the mask ordinance has served its purpose and we can move on from it and just encourage people to use, be courteous and think of others and use masks where they think it is appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Anyone else wish to weigh in on the mask ordinance?
Mr. President, at this time, the fact is, the governor also said he is not going to do anything to enforce the wearing of masks in public places, including places of business. He wasn't going to enforce it. Yesterday afternoon, I stopped at a small business in Bowling Green, and I went in with my mask on, and I noticed that the sign on the door still said that. The masks were required. So I asked the gentleman who was at the counter if they were going to continue requiring masks. I was interested because I knew we would have to discuss this tonight. And he said, yes, in our business, we will require masks be mandated because we don't know people who come in our doors. So there will be businesses in this town that will require them. And I think we need to include that in our conversation so that people are fully aware that if we should lift our requirement tonight, you're not free to not wear a mask if you enter a place of business and they require a mask. I'm vaccinated, but the business I went into yesterday wanted me to wear a mask, and I wore my mask. So this goes along with what Bill said about being courteous, being sensible, protecting yourself. We're aware that the vast majority of people in our country are not vaccinated yet. So those of us who have been are being given the freedom to not wear a mask. But I hope we also can be aware when we're around someone who may be immune compromised or something that we need to exhibit humanity and kindness. So that's all I want to say. And I think that the fact is, without it being enforced, our ordinance becomes useless at this time.
Anyone else wish to make some comments?
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette?
I also support ending the PG mask mandate now. I agree with Bill. The PG mask mandate has served its intended purpose, and in view of the evolving CDC and the daily changing Ohio guidelines, the PG mask mandate is really not useful or necessary. So I fully support it. And
Mr. President, I'm not going to say it's not useful or necessary. I think it is what it is. We live in a country that has, resisted this precaution and this consideration in my mind. But it is what it is. We cannot continue in the face of this reality. But I think every time I go buy a latte, I don't have to have that person wonder if I'm vaccinated, if I'm being considerate. So I plan on masking well into the future, and I hope people join me in doing that. But I think for us to try to continue to regulate it, there's just nowhere to go with it. But, I think it's unfortunate. I've noticed a lot of people refusing to wear masks as time has gone on, kind of partially wearing a mask. And I think we'll see more of that. But I do, again, hope that the majority of us will remember that even if vaccinated, we can still transmit it to others. And, my plan is to continue to avoid it and to continue to help other people avoid it.
Anyone else? Okay. So yes, I mean, naturally, our ending the city mask ordinance in no way impacts individuals or individual businesses that wish to continue to do that. They certainly are free to do that. I know I've received many comments in both directions on this since we began last July. And I have heard from some businesses recently that were thankful that we had done that. But I think that now that there is an effective vaccine, several of them, and that they are widely available, you can walk in any day in town somewhere and get vaccinated if you want to. And the health department will even make an appointment to come to your house and vaccinate you if you can't get out of your house. So I feel that it has been useful. I believe that it has been successful in keeping us from overwhelming our local healthcare. But I think that we're transitioning now from a place where we need to be collectively responsible into an area where we need to be individually responsible. And so, if no one else has anything to say, I would like to make a motion to rescind City Ordinance 8861, known as the ordinance requiring face coverings in certain public spaces to limit the spread of COVID-19.
Mr. President, is that rescinded immediately?
Yes, I would
I second
suggest
that.
that we rescind it immediately and we go with the governor on this one from here on in.
I second that.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. Kay, could you call the roll?
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
yes,
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis.
Yes.
Okay. So ordinance 8861 is rescinded. All right. The minutes from our May 3rd meeting were distributed prior to this evening's meeting for your perusal. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? All right, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Okay, properly moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, minutes are approved. Correspondence. Kay, do we have correspondence?
Yes, I have a couple of things this evening. The first would be a listing of budget transfers from Finance Director Brian Bouchong. Those were distributed to you prior to the meeting and require your approval.
Is there a motion to approve the budget transfer?
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
And then also distributed to you prior to the meeting was the financial budget summary report for the month of April 2021. Note that for the record. And then also distributed to you on Friday, and then also you have a copy in front of you, is a listing of, an extensive listing of appointments and reappointments to city boards and commissions that are requested by the mayor. And I will make sure that this list in its entirety is attached to the minutes for the record, but this does require your confirmation of these appointments and reappointments.
Mr. President,
Mr. Harold.
I have a comment, and then I'll make a motion. And the comment is to thank the mayor for coming up with another stellar list of people to serve on boards and commissions, and the ones that have re-upped. It's a really, there's a lot of really good citizens on that list. And I know it takes a lot of time to go through. So thank you very much. And I want to give a special shout out to former colleague Bruce Jeffers, who has agreed to bless us by being on the Public Utilities Board. And I'm really thrilled about that because he has a lot to offer. Having said that, I move that we approve the appointments and reappointments.
Second.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And thank you to all of these individuals, and it is quite an extensive list for their giving of themselves and their time to the city of Bowling Green.
That's all I have this evening.
All right. That brings us to lobby visitations. Okay.
The first person on the list is Emily Dunapace.
If you could please come to the microphone, give us your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Emily Dunapace, and I live at 415 West Worcester Street. Good evening, Mayor Osbacher, President Hollenbaugh, and members of City Council. I'm here this evening representing Not in Our Town Bowling Green. Not in Our Town Bowling Green enthusiastically supports the proposed changes to the City of Bowling Green anti-discrimination codes. Thank you to Bowling Green City Council. You're to be commended for your efforts to update these codes. And thank you to La Conexión. You are to be commended for your leadership and perseverance to bring about meaningful change as a result of the horrific incident at the Waffle House in March of 2019. The recommendations presented to City Council by La Conexión have a community-centered focus. They are aligned with the vision that we are all working together to create a safe, welcoming, and inclusive community. The City of Bowling Green has a vested interest in ensuring that we are, a safe, welcoming, and inclusive community for everyone. To truly make that happen, we all need to be willing to do more than what has been the status quo. We are in a time when discrimination and hate crimes against people of color, religious minorities, immigrants, people with disabilities, and the LGBT community are increasing. Not only are we seeing an increase in these occurrences, but we also know that these incidents are underreported. Victims are not coming forward because they feel intimidated. They feel fearful. They feel concerned about retaliation, or maybe even worse, they feel that nothing will happen. We, Not in Our Town BG, hear these stories. Fortunately, there are tangible steps that can be taken to reduce or eliminate the occurrence of acts of discrimination and hate. Certainly, conversations and education can and do create change. And beyond that, research has shown that the number one way to reduce or eliminate acts of hate and discrimination is when observers or bystanders get involved in the moment that the incident is happening. Whether these incidents occur at a gathering, a sporting event, or when out in the community or in a place of business, there are safe and effective ways for an observer or a bystander to respond using research-based strategies that have been proven effective at stopping or eliminating acts of hate or discrimination. When considering the request that La Conexión has made, NIAT BG strongly encourages the City Council to certainly consider the additional changes to create a more direct incentive for employers to take reasonable steps to handle the incidents of hate or discrimination that occur on their premises. It is a reasonable request to ask our businesses to take concrete steps to create a safe, welcoming, and inclusive community for everyone. Two main benefits for including this provision are, number one, if employees intervene in safe and effective ways in the moment, the perpetrator is more likely to stop rather than to continue to engage in acts of discrimination of hate or acts of hate, and thus that will help to avoid situations that might escalate into violence. And number two, the provision will help to reduce the potential for discrimination and acts of hate to occur in the future, because perpetrators will know that employees will intervene. When we reimagine a safe, welcoming, and inclusive Bowling Green for everyone, hopefully the vision includes all of us, helping to make Bowling Green a better place. All of us willing to use our eyes, our ears, our voice, our heart, and our head to help and support each other, especially in times of need. All of us includes those who live here, work here, own businesses here, shop here, or are here to visit Bowling Green. The City Council has an opportunity to make a strong and meaningful change to our anti-discrimination codes that will go beyond what has been the status quo and take a big step toward achieving social justice and social equity while working toward a community-centered solution against the occurrence of discrimination and acts of hate. In doing so, you will also send a strong message that in our town, we do not tolerate discrimination or acts of hate. In our town, we are together determined to be a safe, welcoming, and inclusive community for everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
May I ask a question of Emily, please?
All right.
A very brief one. Emily, yes, if you don't mind. You know me, and I'm a big supporter of La Conexión and have been for a long time, and very supportive of NIAT. Been on the Human Relations Commission and chair of the commission for a while. So my heart is certainly with this.
Mm-hmm.
But I am very concerned with what you are actually asking council to do. Now, tonight you made a point of saying, ask businesses to take steps. We can do that, probably, ask them. Our general counsel or our city council has told us we cannot require that businesses actually send all of their employees to training. That would be like every factory worker and every school teacher, every single business downtown, even if they're small local businesses with one owner and one employee, would have to go to this training. So would you be content if the city asked? Because we can do that. NIAT can ask that. The Human Relations Commission can do that. We can't mandate. I mean, it's been said to La Conexión several times that we cannot mandate this. Would you be satisfied if we had a resolution asking the Human Relations Commission to make an attempt to educate all employees in Bowling Green as to what to do if they see discrimination take place in the form that took place at the Waffle House?
I will be really much in favor of considering all options. I think I don't know that I can really truly address.
I understand that too,
because
yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
Beatriz is prepared. And so
Okay.
so I
Okay.
appreciate if I could avoid. I mean, I certainly don't
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
try to
and
answer
I
something
guess I
don't-
was only
I'm not
asking you
knowledgeable about.
on your behalf of NIAT since you were
My
speaking on
message
behalf
is
of
about it's all of us together.
And I
Um,
agree with you.
it
It's going to
is,
take a village.
It is business owners recognizing that they do have a responsibility to help people who walk into their business so that they know they are safe.
Mhm.
And I think we have things more things than what we are doing
Mhm.
available to us.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Alyssa Carafa. Didn't wear my heels. Okay.
If you could state your name and address,
Sure.
please, for the record.
Can you hear me okay? Okay.
Mhm.
Alyssa Carafa, 1516 Muirfield Drive here in Bowling Green, Ohio.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to come down here on behalf of Conneaut Elementary School, and I wanted to thank the city of Bowling Green, the Bowling Green City Parks, the mayor, all of you, everyone that has been a part of our traffic pattern that our vehicle pickup has. Oh my gosh, it like almost makes me cry, but we have parents going through the park trying to stay to the right, and then they utilize this little like pathway onto our property, and it alleviates so much traffic on Fay and on Conneaut. And a side like bonus is our vehicle pickup went from 25 minutes to 11 minutes.
Wow.
And that is pretty consistent. And so especially with the number of parents that have increased their vehicle pickup plans. And so I can't thank you enough. My staff is like, yeah, I'll do car duty. Like, they want to be out there, but I think there's a quick, easy flow. It's continuous. Actually, the Bowling Green Police Department has been wonderful too. They've come out and tried to help too, just in case, there was any confusion. They've been wonderful. So I just want to say thank you. And so we have some Bobcat apparel and water bottles and such for you. Mr. Scroochie has all that. So, but if anybody ever wants to come out and see it, feel free. It's like beautiful. So,
Thank you. That's very
Kristen Otley, I
kind.
know you're here. Thank you so much. You guys, it was wonderful. I felt like a big present. I know that's been a struggle for many administrators before me. Mr. Lang struggled with that, especially as Conneaut has grown. Our enrollment is so high. And then with preschool being there, it's been wonderful. So I just want to say thank you. We really appreciate you. And also a big shout out to the City Park and Golf Course Maintenance Department. I know they've had to deal with moving their trucks with our parents kind of blocking them. They've been gracious and kind as well. Again, I'm trying to speed it up as fast as I can. So down to 11 minutes. Really appreciate it.
Thank
So
you.
that's all. Thank
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
As much as I don't mind getting praise, I don't know as if we really deserve it. It was the initiative of the mayor and working closely with staff and the school system. He reported it to us. So if you wish to thank us for all the good things that Mike does, we're open to it. But kudos to Mike and the staff, and it's a good example of local government in action.
And you can't have your swag back.
Yeah, that's too late for that.
We're all in it together, Bill. Thanks.
Next person is Paul Tyson.
You could state your name and address for the record, please.
Yep. Paul Tyson, 619 Normandy, right here in Bowling Green. Just as a side, the first thing I suggest is getting some pressure in your water fountain. Like most people, I hate public speaking, got a dry mouth, so bear with me here a little bit. I'm here to speak about the proposed changes to the anti-discrimination law. I've been a resident here at Bowling Green for 30 years now, and I've seen everything it has to offer in an angle most people here don't get to see. I've seen the lows, I've seen the highs, I've seen the valleys, I've seen the mountaintops, I've seen the sinners and the saints, often at their most raw and vulnerable. And I'm here to tell you right now, Bowling Green does not have a racism problem. What it does have is an identity politics problem. You've got people here that are going to use identity politics, something along the line of race, as a weapon and a shield to go ahead and suppress debate over ideas, whether their ideas have merit or not. Now, the tactics are the same, whether or not it's called critical race theory, anti-racist discrimination. They use pseudoscience, misuse of language, zero-sum game, cultural relativism, rhetoric, and sometimes, unfortunately, lies. Again, they use this as a weapon in order to go ahead and suppress debate. Now, the most recent tool being used is something called the Waffle House incident. The unfortunate reality is there are key elements of that incident that are not getting shared with the public. For starters, the main actors in it, the attackers and the victims, were not from Bowling Green. Insults were hurled both ways. There was an independent group of people, several of which were from Bowling Green, that stated that the people throwing the racial slurs were the victims, not the attackers. One of those party, again, from Bowling Green, stepped in and was ready to confront the people throwing out the racial slurs, which again, they said were the victims. Waffle House employees intervened. They did separate people. They also spoke with people, did tell them to knock it off. Once an illegal action took place, they called the police. The police investigated. Charges were filed for laws that were violated. Unfortunately, at this point, there has been a lot of inaccurate representation and incomplete presentation of the events of that day, which is leading to a lot of misunderstanding by the public. At this point, from what I understand, it looks like you're considering a change to the ordinance, and what it looks a lot like is the establishment of a government tribunal presiding over private citizens and having a hearing to determine whether or not their behavior is moral and ethical by a government standard. It looks like it's going a little bit further than that even, by passing judgment on whether those private citizens properly judged the behavior of other private citizens to determine whether it was moral or ethical, again, by a government standard. That's not something that has place in this America. I understand there's also a push to go ahead and make these businesses tell their employees what is and isn't moral and ethical behavior, again, by a government standard, although listening to you, it sounds like that's probably not going to happen. Again, that's something I'm opposed to, but it sounds like it's not going to happen. Private business does not have the right, and it's not their duty or job to tell citizens how to behave morally and ethically. It is not government's job to be telling people this, whether they do it directly or by proxy through the business. Leave the people alone. Let them live their lives. Let them have their freedom, as opposed to letting some of these rights get eroded. I did write something up. I'll go ahead and give this to council at this point. That's what I got.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay.
Amanda Sacro.
If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi there. My name is Amanda Shockel. I live at 710 Scott Hamilton Street. And thank you all for having us here again today. And I am here on behalf of La Conexion's Immigrant Solidarity Committee and Policy Committee. And I will address Sandy's question in a minute. I do have a statement to read first, but then I will go ahead and address your question. All right. Most of it will be fairly familiar. I believe you guys received most of these comments via email already, but we just wanted to share them and offer the opportunity to ask questions. So first of all, we want to thank you so much for going forward with the amendments that are currently currently up for decision here. We definitely support them. And if that is as far as you are willing to go, then we don't want our decision here to stop you, to be clear. We very much think that those are a step forward. But that being said, in asking for this one step more, we're really trying to get at the core of what people were talking about during our community conversations. I know a few of you were there for at least one of them. And one of the things that people went back to again and again was saying that if they had been in that situation, they imagined themselves, if they had been those Waffle House employees, if they had been, they even talked about scenarios where they had been in a restaurant or a business and they had heard this sort of thing going on and they didn't know what to do. And that was a big focus of a lot of what they were wanting. And the truth is, you're right. We don't have the right under state law to make a mandate. So I'm going to read this part because it just makes sure that I get it clear for you. So we know there's been some misunderstanding and miscommunication about what we're asking for. So the provision we're asking for does not require businesses to do anything. It's intended to be, we're asking to essentially create an additional liability. Is essentially what it would mean, that because currently under the law, you're looking at the business would be responsible if the policy led to the discrimination. So if they had a policy that was clearly discriminating, then you would blame the business. If you had an individual who acted against the policy, then we would be going to the individual. What we're looking for here is to sort of tie those together so that when the business fails to take some reasonable steps to ensure that the policy isn't causing discrimination, that is when they can be held accountable. We're open to a lot of options here in terms of the language. And we understand there's some hesitancy in the idea of having people have to step in the moment. So we're open to possibly making this reasonable preventative steps, or plenty of other things. There are lots of options. I mean, we've been working with the idea of taking reasonable steps because in common legal language, it essentially means that what a third-party observer would consider to be actions that at least minimally address the issue at hand without risking safety or injury. And including this provision would create an incentive for the business to adopt policies and training. It doesn't force them to. They can address that potential liability however they would like to. There are lots of liabilities that companies are open to every day. They don't address all of them. They may minimize them. They make choices. And we know that this is a difficult conversation to have. We've been talking about this 2 years, so we're all like down a hole together. And it is a public policy problem, and the magnitude is challenging. And we know that you guys can receive backlash from businesses and constituents for appearing to impose policy decisions on businesses. But we just want to welcome dialogue and partnerships with businesses on this issue, and we believe that we can come to a solution that makes sense for everybody. And then Sandy, can you repeat your question? Just so I'm sure that I'm answering
Let me
it.
ask you if it is difficult. It is difficult, which
Yeah.
is a big problem. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked before, which is, would you be satisfied if we were to pass a resolution and ask the Human Relations Commission to advocate for every business to have a discrimination policy and plan? Or I mean, I shouldn't even be saying those words because I don't know what's going to be legal and what's not, and I'm not a lawyer, and I wouldn't be drafting the legislation. But we know we have a lot of laws on the books that aren't enforced, that can't change people's attitude.
Yeah.
But I think our Human Relations Commission can change people's attitude. You've done a lot in the area of making us a welcoming community. We're in action in that respect right now. So they don't pass laws. The Human Relations Commission doesn't. But I think they can have an extreme effectiveness. And where our hands are really tied on doing what you're asking us to do right now from my viewpoint. And you've known me a long time, and you've known that I have been very supportive of what you do. So I just want to make that known to you so that everyone can understand that this is just not a simple request. It's a very, very difficult thing to attain legally.
Yes, we are aware that it is very difficult. And if that looks like that is our only option, yes. Like I said, the provisions that are already in this revision, they take a lot of steps that we think are really, really important. Like no doubt. And if there is absolutely no way we can figure out to make language to sort of use a liability to incentivize businesses, and that's essentially what we're trying to do. Say, look, here's this new potential liability. We think you should do training to try to avoid that. But if there's not an option for that, if you guys don't see a path to that, yes, some sort of city guided incentive program would be the alternative. Like I said, we would like to see something a bit tougher because technically right now, discrimination is against the law. It's already against the law.
We have
it's
a law
already
right
out there. We've added some more categories. And the truth of the matter is, I've worked in retail for 20 years, mostly corporate retail, personally. And I can tell you, the training we're talking about, I've gotten it at every single corporate retail place ever. It's standard onboarding. This is not a huge obligation, something strange we're asking them to do. I understand that for smaller businesses, it's probably more of a challenge, but a lot of companies have seen this as common sense and good for their business, but there are still some that don't. Yeah. And so we're trying to reach that little bit that aren't.
Well, and
which
you
is
are
why
aware
we're hoping
that,
for a little bit more.
The Bowling Green Police Department has developed a program which you have presented. It was very well attended, and that is there and can be used. I mean, there was no reluctance on the part of the chief of police to develop that program, which was, the original intention was for bar employees. And I think it was a very good idea that bar employees have some training in this area also, because when people tend to drink, they tend to do things they wouldn't normally do. And so that's a good place to have some good training. And that is there.
Yes. Yeah. And we fully support that program. We think it's good to have in place, to have it as an option for companies.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah. Are there cities that you're aware of that impose additional liability in the way that you're asking us to do?
Yes. I don't have that list with me. I have it at home. I can send that to you via email if that's okay.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep. Anything else?
No. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Is it for lobby visitation?
Yes.
Introduction of new legislation.
Mr. President.
Mr. Robinette.
On behalf of the Finance Committee, I have 3 resolutions and an ordinance. First, a resolution declaring it necessary to replace an existing tax for the purpose of providing funds for parks and recreation purposes, and requesting the Wood County Auditor to certify the total current tax valuation of the city and the dollar amount of revenue that would be generated by that levy, and declaring the necessity of a levy in excess of the maximum rate authorized by law without a vote of the electors of 2.0 mils. I also have a resolution determining to proceed to submit to the electors of the city of Bowling Green, Ohio, the question of a replacement tax in excess of the 10 mil limitation for the purpose of providing 2.0 mils for parks and recreation purposes in the city of Bowling Green. And a resolution authorizing the city of Bowling Green, Ohio to accept funds provided by the American Rescue Plan Act, signed into law by the President of the United States, to provide support in responding to the impact of COVID-19, and authorizing the finance director to establish Fund 2027 Local American Rescue Plan Act Fund to account for said funds. And I have an ordinance providing supplemental appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Bowling Green, Ohio during the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2021 and ending December 31st, 2021.
Thank you very much. I have an ordinance, which I'll try to read without my glasses. An ordinance authorizing the utilities director to execute a construction agency agreement with the Wood County Port Authority, accept grant funding from the state of Ohio, request qualifications, and enter into a contract or contracts for engineering services, and to advise or advertise for construction bids and enter into a contract or contracts for utility and right-of-way improvements for the expansion of Woodbridge Business Park.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps.
I have an ordinance from the Planning, Zoning, and Economic Development Committee amending the zoning district map of the city of Bowling Green for approximately 2.97 acres on East Wooster Street, located between 1616 and 1630 East Wooster Street, from B2 general commercial to S2 planned commercial zoning, as petitioned for by Bowling Green Lodge LLC.
Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to official reports. Mr. Mayor.
Good evening, council. I have no report, but I'm happy, of course, to answer any questions that you may have.
Does anyone have any questions for the mayor this evening? All right, thank you very much. Municipal Administrator, Ms. Treader.
Good evening. Just a few quick things for you. In noting the change to the mask mandate, I did want to make one clarification. President Hollenbaugh had mentioned that there will be certain other regulations, and we do want to note that our transit service, which receives federal transit dollars, will have to comply with the Federal Transit Administration. We were informed today that the mask mandate for both the riders and for our drivers will be in place until September 13th. So again, I know that was addressed, but we did want to make that note that, again, that is the federal government that is making that mandate to our vehicles. Just a quick reminder that on May 26th, the mayor has invited you and council has agreed to have a special meeting to declare Bowling Green as a Purple Heart City that will occur at 6 p.m. at City Park at the Veterans Building. Weather permitting, we will be outside. And then we are following that with a training opportunity about economic development incentives. If you may recall, this was a 2020 goal of council to learn more about additional incentives that are available by the state of Ohio. We had put it off, delayed it several times due to COVID, and we are excited to be hosting the Montrose group to educate you and others who are interested in learning more about those incentives. Again, that'll be right inside the Veterans Building, right there while we are at City Park. Do you want to note that brush collection started today, And this is, again, that scheduling system that we've been using for a little while here. That's been very successful. We think it's a more efficient system to respond to people's addresses. We had about 300 people who requested brush collection this time. And the last thing to let you know is that our grants administrator, Tina Bradley, has submitted her retirement announcement to us, and Friday will be her last day with the city of Bowling Green. And that completes my report, subject to your questions.
Are there any questions for Ms. Treader? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Did Heather leave? Okay. Parks and Recreation Director, Ms. Otley.
My report is very brief, although I think you may have questions. I'm not sure. Summer is back. I mean, that's pretty much it. We are really, really, really looking forward to a almost normal summer. Okay, it'll be almost there. But check out the website. Registration is underway for everything. Pool is scheduled to open Saturday of Memorial Day weekend. And we had a whole bunch of really excited pool employees starting training on Saturday. I went and addressed them, and they're so excited because a lot of them were all ready to go last year. And of course, we made the very painful, easy decision. So things are underway, and I just didn't know if you guys had any questions about anything at all since I'm here.
I was out at the park on Saturday, and I saw a bunch of cars parked where cars are usually parked for people at the pool. And then when I went around the corner of the building, I saw your collection of very attentive listeners.
Absolutely. Great, great young people. So lots of Bowling Green High School and BGSU students and college students from everywhere that live here. So we have a fine crew, and we are implementing Ellison Associates as our training from the Red Cross. Red Cross was good as well, but Ellison Associates, that's all they do. The fire chief and I were talking about that today. So that's going to be a good switch. They pop in and do spot checks all the time, which is what we want. So, and our fire department is great working with us as well on that. So we have camps, safety town, I mean, everything. And parks continue to be heavily used as they have been all throughout the pandemic. And we look forward to, although we've had rentals going on for a long time, of course, with some of the mandates being lifted, we do look forward to being able to serve people even more. So,
are there any questions for Ms. Otley? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
City Attorney, Mr. Marsh. Anyone have a question for Mr. Marsh? Okay, and based on my powers of observation, that would be it then. Okay. That brings us to council committee reports.
Mr. President?
Mr. Zanfordino.
Last Thursday, we had our 13th and final Community Improvement Committee meeting regarding the issue of rental registration, licensing, and inspections. Thank you, Bill and Jeff, for your hard work. Our next step that we have spoken about at that meeting is to request a committee of the whole meeting to discuss our recommendations relative to the draft that we've been issued. And I know we have some work to do before we establish that date, but just wanted to announce tonight that the committee work is completed, and sometime in June, we will have that committee of the whole meeting.
Okay, thank you very much, John.
Thank you.
Any other council committee reports?
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps?
this evening, the Planning, Zoning, and Economic Development Committee held the required public hearing on Ordinance 8918. No objections were heard. Short and sweet.
I know, I saw. It was a very well-managed meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
we also held a finance committee meeting tonight and received a report from the finance director, first quarter of 2021. a few special topics, a very nice, thorough briefing. I recommend anybody who wasn't able to attend to review the slides. They're pretty detailed.
Yeah, due to situations beyond my control, I missed that meeting. However, I'm sure it was very well managed as well. Are there any other council committee reports? Okay, that brings us to the reading of legislation.
Legislation for first reading, resolution number 3793 for first reading, resolution declaring it necessary to replace an existing tax for the purpose of providing funds for parks and recreation purposes and requesting the Wood County Auditor to certify the total current tax valuation of the city and the dollar amount of revenue that would be generated by that levy, and declaring the necessity of a levy in excess of the maximum rate authorized by law without a vote of the electors of 2.0 mils. Resolution number 3794 for first reading. Resolution determining to proceed to submit to the electors of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio, the question of a replacement tax in excess of the 10 mil limitation for the purpose of providing 2.0 mils for parks and recreation purposes in the City of Bowling Green. Resolution number 3795 for first reading, resolution authorizing the City of Bowling Green, Ohio to accept funds provided by the American Rescue Plan Act, signed into law by the President of the United States to provide support in responding to the impact of COVID-19 and authorizing the Finance Director to establish Fund 2027 Local American Rescue Plan Act Fund to account for said funds.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I move to suspend the rules and give resolution 3795 its second and third readings.
Second?
Okay, been properly moved and seconded. Okay,
Hollenbaugh,
yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold.
Yes.
Okay, the rules are suspended for resolution 3795.
Resolution number 3795 for second and third reading, resolution authorizing the City of Bowling Green, Ohio to accept funds provided by the American Rescue Plan Act, signed into law by the President of the United States to provide support in responding to the impact of COVID-19 and authorizing the Finance Director to establish Fund 2027 Local American Rescue Plan Act Fund to account for said funds.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I move to adopt resolution 3795.
Second?
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All right, Kay?
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh.
Yes. Resolution 3795 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8936 for first reading, ordinance providing supplemental appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio during the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2021 and ending December 31, 2021.
Mr. President,
Mr. Harold.
I just wanted to interject before Greg made his motion to suspend to see if Rachel had anything to say.
Yes, thank you. I sent an email earlier today just flagging an issue that I see here. In Lori's agenda or memo that accompanied our agenda this Monday, it sounds like one of the supplemental appropriations at issue here is for a project or for work to be done by consultant Manick and Smith to update the bike plan in our 2008 transportation plan. And I, welcome Lori explaining that a little bit more to us. But my understanding is, well, I guess first, it's a current strategic goal of council to renew our commitment to complete streets through either a policy or ordinance. And because our efforts on this strategic goal will likely impact the proposed work of the consultant Manick and Smith, I just wanted to flag the issue, and I wonder if it doesn't make sense to delay turning Manick and Smith loose on the bike plan update until we develop a policy and or ordinance. So earlier today, I attached a draft policy. I attached a model complete streets ordinance. I totally understand that was 2 hours ago, and y'all probably didn't have a lot of time to spend with those. But for this evening, I mean, really, I just wanted to see if we needed to pump the brakes here. And I just wanted to raise the general question of how we want to proceed on that strategic goal to either create a complete streets policy or resolution, and whether it makes sense to delay, I guess, hiring consultant Manick and Smith. But I would suggest we hear from Lori.
This would authorize us to do that, but we could determine the time at which we did it, right?
Sure. We were trying to respond and move forward. Our understanding from City Council was that, we've kind of have some fits and starts when we've discussed different ways to approach applying bicycle treatments to streets. Certainly, there is an existing complete streets policy for the city. I'm not sure how, I didn't have time to line them up to see the current one versus the proposed one align. So I'm not sure if an update of a 2008 bike map would be in conflict with complete streets. To me, it would be an additive to it, because it's often been a source of discussion. The feedback we heard from council from, I believe it was Transportation and Safety Committee, the last time we presented to you, was that it was difficult to look at bicycle issues when you didn't have the totality of what the treatments would be. So when we were looking, which we had determined prior to that we were going to look at it in tandem with our paving program. And when we presented that, the feedback we received is that it was too targeted, it was too focused, and that really a bigger plan would be more beneficial. So Joe, the staff, has been working. I know they've had conversations with Bicycle Safety Commission, trying to figure out, okay, what is our best way forward to make sure that we are providing the tool that council wants when you're making those decisions. Updating this map feels, that's our suggestion, to move it forward and to update it and have a public component. So yes, Mark, to answer your question, you're right. You could authorize it and we could not do it, but I would prefer, if for some reason you're not wanting us to go ahead with this, again, in my personal opinion, I don't see that it's a conflict to complete streets. I think it would be an additive. I think the map is old. I think a lot has changed since it was put into place. I think that this is an ongoing community discussion. We do not have the internal time to make the update, and that's why we sought outside consulting to do this work on behalf of council.
Excuse me, Laura. I don't know where that came from, but whoever it was, go ahead.
Well, I was going to go to Rachel first.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lori. I mean, you're exactly right. I don't think this work is at all in conflict with complete streets. I just wasn't aware that we were thinking about hiring a consultant, and I knew that council had the strategic goal. And so us moving forward on the strategic goal in parallel with staff working on a comprehensive plan seems different to me than us approving outlaying funds to hire a consultant, which I understand is, I trust that it's totally necessary. The policy that I attached earlier today really helps, or I hope helps, attempts to reduce to writing kind of the understanding and expectations I think most of us have when we're talking about implementing bike infrastructure. You've seen a copy of it probably months ago. I've worked with Joe, Bill saw a copy, Mark, so it's been out there floating around. So that is one way that we as a council could move forward on a strategic goal, just with a policy. The ordinance, I wonder if the ordinance won't impact the work of a consultant as we create a comprehensive bike plan. In that the model ordinance that I attached earlier today really gets into the nuts and bolts of a process for implementing complete streets. Plenty of communities across the country have complete streets ordinance. It's just, toothier than the resolution we currently have. So there are standards, and it requires data and documentation to indicate where exclusions to the complete streets policy is warranted. And so if we task a consultant to come up with our comprehensive citywide plan, and then council would vote on an complete streets ordinance, I just feel like the work we're going to get from the consultant perhaps won't be as complete as we would want it to be. So I just wanted to pose the question. I absolutely do not think that the work will end up being worthless. I just wondered if the timeline was right.
That's up to council. We'll look to your guidance.
Mr. President?
Lori? Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, Stan, do you have a question for Lori?
Yeah, I do. If she was about to sit down, I wanted to ask you before you sit down. Lori, when I was on the Transportation Committee, we studied complete streets for 2 years and we did come up with a policy.
Right.
Now, I don't know if we adopted it via a resolution. I think we did. I'm questioning my own memory on that, but we have done that work. And I don't know, I did not know you were working on another policy and another resolution. John, do you recall?
I was not working on a resolution. There is a complete streets, sorry to interrupt, Mr. President. We had a complete streets resolution in 2015.
Yes.
And then we
yes.
heard from Lori in March of last year, and she kind of fleshed that out for us.
Yes.
And then to me and to others in kind of conversation, there seemed like there were still some questions. Like, for example, when Transportation and Safety Committee last October heard about Sharrows on Maple and Grove, maybe?
Clay.
And there seemed to be a question of who ultimately was going to make that decision. Was it the Transportation or Safety Committee of Council, or was it Council of the Whole? So my policy is 2.5 pages, and it just kind of tries to flush out those kinds of questions to make things, predictable for our community and council. And so that is one option. The Complete Streets Ordinance is a bigger undertaking.
Yes, we have not passed an ordinance
Right.
as far as
And I
know.
think there's tons of value in that. I really do. I so encourage you to take a look at the model I sent.
Okay,
sooner rather than
I
later.
don't remember getting it.
You
but
just
maybe
got
I
it.
did.
Yeah,
Just don't
this
remember.
afternoon.
Are we
Today?
done with Lori?
No, Mr. President, just a quick procedural question, I guess. Is there a reason why the expenditure to Pogemeyer and Mannequin Smith, the path to the community center versus the map were lumped into one expenditure?
Well, Mannequin Smith, I believe, and Joe, jump up here if I'm wrong here. Mannequin Smith did our last update of the map, so we had planned to just have them update, work with us on data already existing. And Pogemeyer has been working with us on, the path to the community center. So that's why we were looking to continue those works. Again, trying to get to council's goals that you have laid out for us, and trying to get there and achieve those goals.
Lori, I think what Jeff's mentioning is that not that it's two separate organizations or companies, but that it's in the same.
Same line
and
item, right?
We could
It's just an
separate it out.
appropriation. You can have appropriations in a line item, and they can go to multiple sources and be paid to different people in the same line item.
Right. I guess, and what I was getting at is I think there's a lot of value in what Councilmember Phipps is saying. I'm wondering, though, if we could move forward with the Pogemeyer aspect and, that portion, regardless of whether we put, maybe the Mannequin Smith portion on hold.
Yes.
Mr. President?
Mr. Harold.
I think that, first, it made sense, Lori, to put that all in one group, because usually we don't have this kind of discussion. And I agree with Jeff in that regardless of what happens, we really should go forward with the multi-use path engineering with Pogemeyer, because otherwise what we would be doing is holding up a great example of complete streets to get a policy together. So regardless, hopefully we get that part done. But we have several ways to go. And at the risk of stating the obvious, one is to proceed with the study. That's option A. And related to that is, I think it is a discussion worthy of time to revisit the idea of complete streets, not to undo it, but just to, every once in a while, it's good to revisit policy to see if we're heading in the right direction. I think that's what Rachel's intending to do. And just say, okay, we have a resolution, we have a game plan that we've been using for a while, and it's worked to an extent. But we really, I think, at some point need to have a discussion about, are we going to continue with this where we pick our battles, or are we going to become more aggressive, or are we just going to think through some other way? And so I think that's a discussion that's worthy of our time. And the vehicle for doing that would be what Rachel's put together. We may not end up adopting it, but it's a great vehicle for having the discussion. But I think that if we just go ahead with this expenditure and have the study done, and perhaps, and I haven't studied it enough today in the last couple hours to know whether this makes complete sense, but have that model ordinance, send that along to the consultants and just say, if it doesn't add too much to the scope, address some of these things as well. If it does add, then that's a whole different animal, because I'm sure you've allocated the monies for it. So that way we have a dual track. We can have that discussion without worrying about holding things up. We can have the study, which will at some point enhance our discussion by giving us additional information through the update. And we can give time, for example, the Bicycle Safety Commission's meeting tomorrow, and I'm sure they'll have something to say about it as well. So continue with it's actually 3 tracks. One is the Malcolm Smith study. Another is for us to revisit the policy of how we wish to attack complete streets. And the third is get that multi-use path engineered so we can move on from there. And that's what I think, if it makes sense to the rest of council, I think would be a good way to go. So we would pass Ordinance 8936 tonight, and then consider assigning to a committee the idea of revisiting complete streets and go from there. How's that sound, Rachel?
Mr. President?
Ms. Phipps?
Well, it was a 2020 strategic goal of all of council. And the language is to renew our commitment to complete streets through either a policy or ordinance. So I wanted to remind us of that. I think, if possible, the best way forward for me would be to separate out this Pogemeyer appropriation from the Mannigan-Smith appropriation. Have a discussion. I mean, we did not have a strategic planning session this year, and this would have been totally appropriate for that space. But in the near future, at the next council meeting, we can talk through whether or not, as a council, we think a policy or ordinance is appropriate, and then that should give very timely direction to the administration on whether or not to hit go on a Mannigan-Smith update. That would be my proposal.
Are you making a motion of some kind?
I can if discussion's over.
Mr. President, if I could. I mean, in reviewing the work that Mannigan-Smith did for us back in 2007 and 2008, I mean, there are some things that have changed on this map, certainly, but a lot of the routes that they identified at that time very closely track with what the BCS has recommended more recently. A lot of the recommendations that they made in the actual text, we have implemented a lot of them, but there is still a lot of work to be done here. I guess I would favor maybe spending a little bit more time going through this and familiarizing ourselves with this before we are spending any additional money to update what we've already got here.
Any more discussion?
I think we should just make small talk till Greg gets back.
Well, that was the plan, yeah.
How about them Cleveland Indians? How about them
How about
Mets?
those Mets?
How
Yeah.
about those Mets?
So Jeff, in a way, you're saying a very similar thing to Rachel, that Rachel's information is very new to us all. I'd personally like to separate out the Pogemeyer aspect tonight, give us more time to read and process what Rachel sent us, and then in the near future, move ahead with the second part of the appropriations.
I would agree with that. And I guess page 32 of the 70-page planning document that we have is where the map can be found. And I mean, they identify all the major points of interest. There's not been a lot of change on that list in the last 10 years. And again, a lot of the routes are some of our main routes that have been main routes for a long time in the community. So I don't know. I'd be interested to see how much of that has changed, but I think that that would be a good first step for where, and I don't know what the breakdown is of the expenditure between Manikin Smith and Pogemeyer, but it seems like we could save some money there.
Again, to repeat what Lori had said, and that is we could go ahead with approving the supplemental appropriations with the understanding that they hold off on the Manikin Smith. And also, I very much would like to see the incorporation of the Bicycle Safety Commission has worked a lot on updating the map, and I would like that incorporated somehow. But I also wanted to give some background, a little bit of background on or backstory with the steps prior to this consultant, and that is that the administration, Joe Fawcett in particular, saw it as a good goal to update, as Lori mentioned, give kind of a more general, comprehensive view of the different streets, and then adopt that map at some point as this is what council agrees to. And then we don't have Maple and Clay have been done. What should we put on Maple and Clay? And so that to me is I think a great idea to go through in a comprehensive fashion, do the update, come up with the map, have council approve it with the proviso that as it gets closer to the time that there's actually street improvements being made or whatever, the council can revisit it. But the default is, this is the map. You better have a good reason not to go with what you agreed to as our master plan on how we're going to treat the complete streets. So I think the concept is very good. I personally think that it would be okay to continue down that path, because that's just one component. That's the nuts and bolts of it. And it might render a bit moot should the sidewalk or should transportation and safety make these decisions, or council? Personally, I think it should be council. And so if we had that approach where council has approved this master plan, and then as things go on, we revisit it to see if there's any good reason to change it. I think that's great. I think it can proceed. We can get some more discussion and firm up what we really mean now with complete streets, and go from there. So I guess that's a long way of saying I think that it would be good just to proceed. And if that's not the case, then I most definitely think we should continue with the portion for Pogemeyer so that we can get the multi-use path engineered.
So do I have a motion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I move to suspend the rules and give ordinance 8936 its second and third readings.
Well, I'll second. Properly moved and seconded.
Didn't have time.
Okay.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
No.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
No.
All right. The rules are suspended for ordinance 8936. Okay.
Mr. President, I just want to have a point of order that is an obscure thing, but I should have said it before, and that is, even if someone wanted to amend this, it cannot be amended when it's been given just its first reading. So if there was a motion to amend, it couldn't be done until it had at least two readings, according to section 31.19. No amendment shall be offered until read a second time.
Mr. President?
I need to read it.
It hasn't been read.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that, Kay.
Ordinance number 8936 for second and third reading. Ordinance providing supplemental appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Bowling Green, Ohio during the fiscal year beginning January 1, 2021 and ending December 31, 2021.
Mr. President.
Ms. Phipps,
Okay, so now I'm just to be clear, I may move to amend ordinance to separate the Pogemeyer appropriation from the Mannequin Smith appropriation.
Should we state an amount? What you're changing
We
an
don't know
appropriation.
we don't know the amount. I'm not sure.
I mean, you're changing the appropriation.
The
so-
Mannequin Smith contract was for 6,300.
Okay,
You got to do the math now.
I know. So the total was for 15.
Right.
Who gets it the fastest?
8,700.
Okay. Remains. Okay, so Mr. President, I move to change the approved supplemental appropriation to the amount 8,700.
Second.
And that would be for the one that's for 1010-190-73-700 account number. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, that's exactly right.
I think that should be part of the motion, just so we know what account number we're
Okay.
changing
I'm sorry,
to
guys.
8,700.
Yeah. You need me to restate it, or you're just adding?
I think it's good.
Okay, thank you.
Your second?
all right, so it's been moved and seconded to amend ordinance 8936 in such a manner as was described.
Mr. President, one can be in favor of this, irrespective of how they're in favor of the remaining 6,300. So I'm hoping that everybody votes in favor of this so that we can proceed with the Pogemeyer design of the engineering for the multi-use paths.
Mhm.
Okay. So it's been properly moved and seconded to amend ordinance 8936. I've said it so many times I can almost read it correctly.
There you go.
Oh, Mr. President,
Please go.
if it's a question for Mike Marsh, and that is if we go ahead and amend this to the 8,700 and pass it, does 8936, it's gone then? We would have to have another ordinance for the remaining 6,300?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so I changed my comment that if you vote for this, then we will have to restart with the other portion instead of voting on it separately.
Well, let's vote then.
Roland,
We're voting to separate them.
you're voting on the amendment.
Yeah, if the amendment
Yeah.
doesn't pass,
Yes.
then,
Okay. Zanfordino?
Well, I'm sorry, excuse me. Go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say that if you're voting for this, and you might think you're voting for it because you're in favor of the multi-use path engineering, but the ramification of that is that you are then killing the study by Malik and Smith. So if you want both to be included, it's kind of an odd thing, but you want both to be included, you have to vote no. So you may have to vote no on the multi-use path so that you can have both of them, which is kind of a crazy way of looking at it.
Well, then we're voting for the ordinance the way it,
We're voting to separate.
we're voting to separate.
Well, to kill one part and pass the other part.
Well, so we're postponing the
Yeah.
consultant for the update of the plan, but we are voting to move forward with the Pogemeyer plan to connect the community center.
Correct.
Okay.
So if you're in favor of both of them, you have to vote no. If you're in favor of one of them, then you would vote yes.
If we ever vote.
If we ever vote.
Okay. So Sandy, you already voted, correct? You voted?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so I'll
I
start
don't think
over.
I did. It's been so long.
I'll start over. Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
No.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette.
Yes.
All right, so, ordinance 8936 has been amended.
That's correct. I need a motion to adopt.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I move to adopt ordinance 8936 as amended.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded, and as much as it pains me by order, I have to say, is there any discussion? Hearing none. Okay.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland.
Yes.
Okay, so ordinance 8936 is adopted as amended.
Excuse me, Mr. President, could I just make a brief comment?
Yeah.
I'd like to mark this date down for future reference the next time the administration is criticized for not implementing complete street concepts. There has been a great deal of conversation, a great deal of pressure to a certain extent for the administration to consider, recommend, and implement complete streets design concepts. This represents administration's recommendations on the best way to follow through on that policy. This is an instance where council's interest in assessing, studying, although often well-intentioned, is holding back progress. And I just want to make that note for the record, please.
Mr. President, I agree with what the mayor has said. I am in favor and very appreciative of the work that Joe has put forth to put together this game plan on revising the bicycle map and eventually implementing a method where we can vote once on the entire plan and then revisit it from time to time. I think it was a very, very good idea of Joe, and I am very appreciative of it. Hopefully what we can do is between now and the next meeting, take the other part, the 6,300, and get to a point where we can proceed with that. I think it's good. My preference would have been to continue with all of it and take the 3-track approach. But at this point, we can let the Bicycle Safety Commission meet, maybe have a committee meet, and then revisit this next time. So I certainly agree with you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Kay, could you proceed with the reading of legislation?
Ordinance number 8937 for first reading, ordinance authorizing the Utilities Director to execute a construction agency agreement with the Wood County Port Authority, accept grant funding from the state of Ohio, request qualifications, and enter into a contract or contracts for engineering services, and to advertise for construction bids and enter into a contract or contracts for utility and right-of-way improvements for the expansion of Woodbridge Business Park. Ordinance number 8938 for first reading. Ordinance amending the zoning district map of the city of Bowling Green for approximately 2.97 acres on East Wooster Street, located between 1616 and 1630 East Wooster Street, from B2 General Commercial to S2 Planned Commercial Zoning as petitioned for by the Bowling Green Lodge LLC.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps.
I need to set a public hearing on this ordinance for June 21st at 6:45. Does that work, Kay?
Yes.
I'm sorry, say again the date?
6:21.
Oh, 621.
621.
That's 6:45.
6:45.
Legislation for second reading. Ordinance number 8932 for second reading. Ordinance amending and adopting Section 33.03A of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio, relating to pay for school police, interns, and civil infractions office hearing officer. Ordinance number 8933 for second reading. Ordinance amending and adopting Section 153.01 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio, relating to the definition of discriminate or discrimination, and amending Section 153.02 in multiple sections to effectuate said new definition. Ordinance number 8934 for second reading. Ordinance amending and adopting Chapter 39 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio, concerning unlawful discrimination. Ordinance number 8935 for second reading. Ordinance creating and adopting Section 31.38 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio, related to civility and rules of decorum at public meetings. Legislation for third reading. Ordinance number 8920 for third reading. Ordinance amending and adopting sections of Chapter 30 of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio regarding departmental organization.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette,
I move to adopt ordinance 8920.
Second?
properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay,
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland.
Yes.
Zanfordino.
Yes.
All right, ordinance 8920 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8921 for third reading. Ordinance amending and adopting section 30.11 of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio concerning compensation for mayor.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette,
I move to adopt ordinance 8921.
Second?
properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Harold,
I'm generally hesitant of granting raises to elected officials, even with the very important requirement that the raise be given to future office holders. We can't give raises to ourselves, thankfully. I've been faithfully going to council meetings for a quarter of a century, either here in the front of the room or at the cool kid table in the back. I have observed and in many cases worked with 6 mayors. By and large, they've been hardworking, dedicated public servants. They've earned their salary and then some. And although the increase is a substantial percentage increase, it is in line with the work. And as Exhibit A, I would give you the work that our current mayor has put in. It's a great example and ample evidence that the salary should be increased.
all right. Okay,
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis.
Yes.
All right, ordinance 8921 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8922 for third reading. Ordinance amending 31.37B of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio regarding salary and duties of councilpersons.
Mr. President,
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Robinette.
I move to adopt ordinance 8922.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Harold,
I really wrestled with this one. When I was on council way back in 1987, there was a vote, ordinance 4825, to increase council pay from $100 a month to $250 a month. The vote passed by a 6-1 margin. I was the lone no vote. At that time, we were notifying the citizens that the city budget was pretty tight, and I didn't think that was a good message to send. But that was then, and that was my case. Now, of course, we're at a different place in trying to determine whether to give the raise. And there's a couple components to this. One is, yes, it is an increase. 2, it is for not the next council, but the next council, essentially. So it's pretty far in the future. And the third thing is that it ties the council pay to the minimum earnable salary for service credit by Oprah. So theoretically, once we pass this, we will never have to address it again. And just to give some context, and again, this is my situation only. Last year, if you take the number of hours that I served in a non-election year, so this isn't any campaigning, and the $2,200 that I spent in the performance of my office, if you do the math, it comes to $6.17 an hour. So that's just to let people know that, yeah, it takes a lot of work, and perhaps it wouldn't be a bad idea to give the council in the future a bit of an increase to have it come in line with the amount of work that many of us put in.
Okay, any other comments? Okay,
Hollenbaugh,
yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold.
Yes.
Ordinance 8922 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8923 for third reading, ordinance amending and adopting section 33.01 of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio regarding salary schedule established.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I move to adopt ordinance 8923.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh.
Yes. Ordinance 8923 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8924 for third reading, ordinance amending and adopting section 33.18 of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio regarding salaried employees not subject to overtime pay.
Mr. President,
Mr. Robinette.
I move to adopt ordinance 8924.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps.
Yes.
Ordinance 8924 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8925 for third reading, ordinance authorizing the Utilities Director to enter into a contract or contracts with Aclara for meter reading equipment and services.
I move that we adopt ordinance 8925.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette.
Yes.
All right. Ordinance 8925 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8926 for third reading, ordinance authorizing the Utilities Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract or contracts or participate in the interlocal purchasing system for roof replacement at the Water Pollution Control Facility.
I move that we adopt ordinance 8926.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Ordinance 8926 is adopted.
ordinance number 8927 for third reading, ordinance authorizing the Utilities Director to enter into a contract or contracts with Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories for engineering services and equipment related to electric substation monitoring and communications upgrade.
I move that we adopt ordinance 8927.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino.
Yes.
All right. Ordinance 8927 is adopted.
Ordinance number 8928 for third reading, ordinance amending the zoning district map of the City of Bowling Green for approximately 1.4 acres generally located at 304 North Church Street and 316 North Church Street and 305 North Main Street from I-1 institutional and S3 planned institutional zoning to B3 Central Business District zoning.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps.
I move to table ordinance 8928 until June 7th.
Second.
Okay. Properly moved and seconded. Okay.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis.
Yes.
Okay. So ordinance 8928 is tabled to the date certain of June 6th,
7th.
7th, 2021.
Ordinance number 8929 for third reading, ordinance creating and adopting Chapter 121 of the codified ordinances of the City of Bowling Green, Ohio regarding rental dwelling registration.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I mentioned at last week's Community Improvement Committee meeting the prospect of amending this to expand a list of exemptions. And I sent out an email more than 2 hours ago with an explanation. Basically, the current ordinance, as it reads now, has a couple exemptions, and they're basically taken, or they are taken from the fair housing portion of our ordinances. But as you recall, we have the ordinance before us, which is for registration, and then we have a draft ordinance somewhere that is for the inspection. And in that draft ordinance, there is a list of exceptions that, or exemptions, that is more comprehensive and I think more in keeping with what we are hoping for with the registration. So that's why I'm doing that. For example, the current legislation does not have an exemption for group homes, and I don't think it's our intention to register group homes. Whereas this section that I'm lifting from what Mike Marsh put together for the inspection portion does include it. So I move that we amend Ordinance 8929 to include Section 121.07, non-exclusivity exemptions. A, the following dwellings are exempt from the requirements of this chapter, and the chapter would be all of what we're talking about here. 1, single-family dwellings that are occupied by members of the property owner's family. 2, for two-family dwellings, if the owner occupies one of the dwellings, and that's similar to the fair housing portion. 3, nursing homes. 4, hotel and motels. 5, dormitories. 6, group homes. 7, bed and breakfast inns. And 8, dwellings subject to inspections by another governmental agency.
Mr. President,
Ms. Rowland?
I'm having trouble trying to take in all these last-minute amendments. We have just never had amendments sent to us like we have been recently, like today. You know, I worked all day and had a 6 o'clock meeting. I didn't see any of these. And I just want to say, I think we should be given more time to consider this. I don't feel that I am knowledgeable enough without reading with my own eyes what it says and referring back to existing parts of our law. So I would have to vote no. Just doesn't help by giving it to me right now.
I sent it 1:25 a.m.
I
on
worked all
Sunday,
day.
and I referred to it in the committee meeting last Thursday. And I work all day too.
Okay, kids. So.
It hasn't been seconded
It
yet.
has not been seconded. How long do we wait for a second?
But your discretion, sir.
Going once? Going twice? All right, motion fails.
So is there a motion to adopt?
Mr. President, am I able to move to amend further? Or alternatively, I
I'd
guess?
rather we just pass.
I would too. I'd like to move to amend the legislation to include a $25 per unit registration fee.
Is there a second?
And 3, 2, 1. Motion fails. All right. John, would you like to make a motion?
Well, I'd just like to say a few things.
Of course.
You know, I appreciate what Bill has suggested, and we did have that, you know, good Sunday, came in Sunday morning, I believe, Bill. But, you know, I think there are so many questions about what we'll be doing with the second aspect of this legislation that it's the last item that concerns me, those that are subject to other inspections. There's just so many questions right now. So, but the rest of that list makes total sense. So I hope we can, you know, revisit it when we do the remainder of the chapter. So, but thanks, you know, for your hard work and your thought. Jeff, you know, I understand your thought, but, you know, I think that seems really spontaneous, and we know that there's really, we've been asked to ignore, to not have any kind of fee attached. Now, and again, with the second part of the legislation, maybe we'll revisit that even, but I don't know that even myself, who really feels that we have to greatly improve our oversight of our rentals, can be that spontaneous, to be honest. And what's possible down the road, I don't know, but just wanted to let you know that's where I'm coming from on that. For what it's worth, since we're all being highly verbal tonight.
I'm not.
But having said that, I would ask Mr. President, I move that we adopt ordinance 8929.
Second.
Okay, properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. President.
Mr. Robinette?
Yeah, this ordinance seems to be treated as a precursor to the inevitable and soon to be introduced inspection legislation. I believe both ordinances should be considered together as they are inextricably tied together. For this reason, I'm going to vote no tonight.
Any other discussion? Okay, could you call the roll, please?
Hollenbaugh,
Yes.
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
No.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
No.
Harold.
Yes.
All right, ordinance 8929 is adopted.
And then the last ordinance, 8918, comes off the table automatically.
Oh, that's right.
Mr. President,
Ms. Phipps?
Kay does not need to read it when it comes off the table. Okay, Mr. President, I move to adopt ordinance 8918.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President, I have no discussion.
Thank you. Kay, could you call the roll?
Phipps,
Yes.
Robinette,
Yes.
Roland,
Yes.
Zanfordino,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Harold,
Yes.
Hollenbaugh.
Yes. So ordinance 8918 is adopted as amended by substitution. Is there any other business to come before council this evening? I would just like to make a few notes with the changes that are forthcoming regarding masks. We will no longer be having a Zoom option for council members to attend meetings in the future. Also, we will, next time we meet, all be sitting at the big kids table. By that time, masks will be, vaccinated people don't have to wear masks. So I don't want anyone to feel shocked if any of us show up not wearing a mask, although you are certainly welcome to wear masks if you want to. There will probably be other changes coming regarding council chambers, but those are the ones that you should definitely anticipate for our next meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.